Jesus has been crucified and has risen from the grave, he still cannot get a break from the very people who claim to believe him. Like, at all. This is the entire Gospel of Mark in a nutshell. If we could sum up all 16 chapters of Mark, it's Jesus came, Jesus was misunderstood, Jesus explained, Jesus was misunderstood, Jesus died, Jesus was misunderstood, Jesus rose, Jesus was misunderstood, end of story. That is Mark in a nutshell. Now, for those of you who have read this particular Gospel before, you certainly know that Jesus wanted to keep his identity as the Son of God a secret. The only people he clues into his identity are his disciples. Now, we, the reader, we benefit from being the reader, because it opens up with, "This is the gospel of Jesus Christ, Son of God." Well, okay, we're clued in as to his identity, but everybody else in the gospel are not. In fact, the only ones that know who Jesus is throughout the entire Gospel of Mark are the demons. Peter gets close, but no cigar, as the phrase is put, right? So the only ones who know that Jesus is the Son of God are the demons. But all throughout the Gospel, Jesus is trying to keep his identity as the Son of God a secret. Yet they don't, and he explains himself over and over again to his disciples. They're kind of in his inner circle. They're the ones that he's trying to clue. I'll tell you who I am, but don't be telling anybody else. I'll tell you. And even though they're getting that secret information being shared with them, of course, Jesus could come right out and say it. He never does, because the wise teacher never just comes out and says something. You've got to kind of earn your way to that. But he gives them clues to figure out who he is, which he doesn't do for anybody else, and yet they just don't get it. He often asks his disciples, "Don't you get it yet? Do you not yet understand?" In today's words, Jesus is it's like he's saying, "I've told you everything, bros. Everything. Everything. Are you really that dense?" If we could hear Jesus in our language, that's exactly what he'd be asking. Are you really that dense that you don't get it yet? Yet they are that dense. And nothing seems to change, even after he has died. Now, it says in our gospel that Mary Magdalene is the first, in this gospel, the first to see the risen Christ. Now, I want to pause here, because the earliest manuscripts in Mark actually end before this particular verse. The actual manuscript in Mark ends with chapter 16, verse 8. And when I say actual, I mean the earliest manuscripts we have, the ones that we have carbon dated to the earliest point. There are some later versions of the gospel that contain everything else, verses 9 through 20. So what that tells historians when we look at this is that the oldest possible manuscripts of Mark stopped at verse 8. And someone later on decided to add verses 9 through 20. Now, to us in this day and age, that sounds like a big shock. But in Jesus' day and age, it was common to add to stories. It was common to add, in fact, if you look at the Old Testament, how it's compiled, you have one creation story followed by the second creation story, followed by this story and that story, and before you know it, you have like 2 or 3 versions of the same story told in different ways. And that's why today people will say the Bible contradicts itself. Well, if it were written by one person, then yeah, it does. But the fact is, it's written by many different people, and the Hebrews felt that all of it were important because it all gave us a little bit of an understanding of who God might be, and not one understanding is the sole truth, so let's keep it all in there. Well, from that point of view, it's not a contradiction. It's actually an added wealth that we have passed down to us. So it's not uncommon for this to happen, but the earliest manuscripts seem to stop at verse 8. Now, verse 8 kind of ends this way. Verse 8 kind of says, "The women fled from the tomb, trembling and bewildered, and they said nothing to anyone because they were frightened. The end. Not quite the most climactic way to end your gospel. So Jesus raises from the dead. He's died. He's been there 3 days. He rises from the dead. He says, "Here I am. Go and tell the others." And they run away afraid. They run away afraid. And that's it. End of story. Could you imagine you invested like an entire movie's length into a story and that's how it ended? So it's not a surprise to me that someone would want to add to it, but ouch! I mean, can someone cut poor sweet Jesus a break? I mean, even after he's risen, even after he's died and gone through that pain and risen from the dead, you still don't get it? You still don't know something like miraculous is going on here? You still don't understand who he is? But no one gets it while he's alive. And they're too frightened to understand he's actually alive following his death. This is the way the Gospel of Mark concludes. Clearly, whoever wrote verses 9 through 20 didn't feel comfortable with that ending and chose to add the expanded ending, which he pulled from, namely, Matthew. Mark was actually written before Matthew by about 10 years. But clearly this person was writing and had that Great Commission in Matthew to go on and decided that was a better way to end it than with people just running away afraid. After all, if they ran away afraid, how would we be here as Christians, right? They didn't tell anybody, so it's not like a far throw in the dark, to say that they must have gone and told somebody. So back to our story. Mary is the first to see the risen Christ in this expanded version of Mark. And she runs to tell the others, but guess what? They don't believe her. Now, it's easy for us to laugh because we have the end of the story. We know he rose from the dead. We know he's the Son of God. So this is like no big deal to us. But imagine someone came and told you, "Samantha, I know Miranda died. But I just saw her walking down the road a few minutes ago." Would you believe me?
Not really, no.
You would think I'm out of my head, right? So, okay. We can only harp on the disciples a little bit here. Because even walking on water doesn't mean you get to walk up after you die, right? So we can understand the disciples here a little bit. But they don't believe her. So the gospel, whoever writes this part of Mark, still continues with the theme of Mark. They don't get it, right? Then he appears to others who also tried to tell the disciples, but guess what? They still didn't believe. Now, in this story, and this is where we come to today in our text, he appears to the disciples. I mean, this risen Christ is just aggravated by this point, okay? He had been to hell and back, literally, and he's just fed up with them. This is like a Mel Brooks film, instead of Dracula dead and loving it, this is like, Christ risen and not loving it at all. He is fed up with the disciples. So, while we might find this comical, looking at back at the disciples and their denseness, perhaps even beyond denseness, their obstinance, their refusal to believe, despite everything they had been given. But let me ask, is this not also true for us today? I mean, we have the benefit of having the end of the story. We have the benefit of seeing how silly the disciples look not believing in Jesus. But do we believe in Jesus? The truth is that Christ has appeared to us. My question to you, because I can't answer this question, have you been awakened to Christ's appearing to you? Have you noticed the risen Christ? Or have you just heard from others that he is risen, and you're not really sure what to make of it? The truth is, Christ has appeared to us. Christ has been calling us and continues to. Just as he said to his disciples, we are called to cast out demons, to speak in tongues, to handle deadly snakes and drink poisons without harm. Now, kids, do not try that at home, okay? I'm not telling you to go home and pick up a copperhead and try to give it a kiss before going to bed tonight, okay? It's probably not going to fare well for you. I'm not telling you to go home and drink the Kool-Aid. I'm not Jim Jones, so I just want to make that clear. Rather than let our imaginations go wild, we could hear this call in this manner. Be my hands and feet. Bring hope, healing, and wholeness to those who need it. We have been given, according to the Gospels, we have been given the power through Christ to bring healing to people who are sick in body, who are sick in mind, who are sick in spirit. Do we believe that we have that power given to us by Christ? Do we believe that Jesus has risen? Do we believe that Jesus has come before us? Do we believe that Jesus has called us? Be my hands and feet. Do you believe the gospel and its message? If so, then show it. Live it out. And my question to you tonight is, how can I help you? How can I help to equip you to live out God's call in your life? Now, when you hear call, that's a scary thing. Trust me, I know. I wouldn't be standing here today if I didn't know how scary being called is. But call does not necessarily mean becoming a pastor or getting yourself to get thee to a nunnery, as they say in Hamlet, right? It doesn't mean going to a monastery and secluding yourself from the world. It doesn't mean not being a parent or whatever. What it means is that you recognize that God has created you for a special purpose, whatever that purpose is. It could be flipping burgers at Burger King. I'm not saying that God calls us to only one thing. We are called by God in every single thing we do. What is your talent? What is your desire? What is your passion in life? And how can you use that for the glory of God and His good news for this world? That's what we're talking about. What has God gifted you with, and how can I help you to share that gift with the world? Jesus is awaiting us. Jesus is awaiting us. He is asking us, do you believe? Do you